Name of this presentation is obviously Expand Your Mind and Free Yourself, A Path to Unity with Grace. The intention of this presentation is to share with you about my own evolution. It's obviously a lot shorter version of my own timeline because it's taking me most of my life, but you don't want to listen to 50 years worth of stories. More especially in the last 8 years, there's been quite a bit of development, and especially in the last, I'm going to say, 6 to 8 months. The other reason for sharing this is just to show you what your mind is capable of and of some options to explore rather than the ones that you currently hold. If you're content with your current belief system, this will not be relevant to you. And there's nothing wrong with the beliefs that you hold as long as you are happy with them. Just an opportunity to show those who are ready to think outside of the box that they have been conditioned to be in, and are uncomfortable with. So, expand your mind and free yourself, a path to unity with grace. It's all in your head or your mind, to be more specific. So there are 4 people here. You probably recognize all of them, maybe not the bottom left there, or bottom right rather. So we've got Oprah Winfrey, Einstein, Michael Jordan, and J.K. Rowling. And you might be asking yourself, what do these 4 people have in common? Well, obviously they're all famous, which just makes them a little easier to learn about their stories and more of an icon for people to pay attention to. But beyond that, they don't have a whole lot in common other than this, their stories. So let me share a little bit about each one. So Oprah, from her first TV reporter job, she was fired and told she was not fit for TV. Einstein was unable to, or at least unwilling anyway, to speak until he was 4. And he was failing miserably in elementary school, and they told him he was stupid. Michael Jordan got benched. I believe it was in high school basketball, and or may have been middle school, but basically told he was no good. And he just worked that much harder at it because he loved it. J.K. Rowling, up until the release of the famous Harry Potter series, was on food stamps and struggling to make ends meet. All of them could have stopped at that point and decided, I'm not good enough. I can't do the thing I love. I'm not good enough. The quote here from Eleanor Roosevelt: no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. You have to be willing to accept the thoughts that are either shared with you or trained into you. It's your decision. So, a little bit about how my story got started. This is my daughter, Grace. She's my beautiful wake-up call. And before I get into sharing what led me to shift my beliefs, I would like to ask you to pay attention to your thoughts as I prepare for this next slide. Pay close attention to the thoughts that you have. She was diagnosed with cancer, and 10 weeks after her diagnosis, despite lots of prayer, diet changes, and moments of profound hope, within 12 weeks total, she would pass. So for those of you that are a parent, I'm I'm going to assume that most, if not all of you, had something like this go through your mind. I can't imagine. So I'm going to ask you to set aside that thought for a minute and try to imagine what that would feel like. And yes, I know this is an uncomfortable exercise, so we're only going to do it for just 30 seconds. Try to imagine your own child, grandchild, niece, whoever, um, in that predicament. I'm quite certain that if you chose to follow that exercise, it was quite challenging for you. And not only because it's not something that any of us want to imagine, but also the pain of imagining it. Have you ever had a moment when you decided what you were taught to believe or others were telling you is true didn't line up with what you felt or recognized in your own experience? And you just decided you couldn't swallow it anymore. I really like an Elizabeth Gilbert quote about this. She said, in her experience, nobody is ready to change until they're tired of their own bullshit. Absolutely. I agree with this. So when you get good and tired of the way your life is going and you recognize the only person that can make any changes to it is you start reevaluating some stuff that you didn't even consider reevaluating. For that, for me, was my religious beliefs, Christianity. Prior to Grace getting sick, we had shifted from a traditional non-denominational church setting to an organic church movement, and we read a lot about different books that were not mainstream and definitely challenged some of the things that the Bible has to say. One of those is this book pictured here called Hope Beyond Hell. And it challenged the idea of um, hell being eternal. For me, that I bought into the new belief system based on this book because the scriptures were really put under a microscope, and it made a lot of sense what this person was saying in the book. But then my daughter passed, and you think it's hard to let go of your child, to maybe send them off to school for the first day or to send them off to the military where you're really not sure what's going to happen. You want to trust, but part of you's like, I don't know. Imagine you don't get to see them ever again, and you're trusting that the person who's caring for them is doing an awesome job. And then you start to question that. And here's where things really got interesting. I went to a grief support group meeting for parents who had lost children, and sit down at a table filled with grieving parents, and the woman next to me shares her story, gut-wrenching, awful story about the loss of her son. And she wraps up this sad story, and she looks to the rest of us and she says, do you think my son is in hell? And I recognized in that moment, no, not one more ounce of pain. No. I cannot choose to trust in a God who is been told to me is unconditional love, and yet we've got conditions, lots of them. This doesn't work for me. So the deep dive into my thoughts really began. And one of the next books I ended up reading is the next one on the picture there, called Love Without an Agenda: Moving the Goalposts from Heaven and Hell to Wholeness. So in that book, it really gets into talking about how the point of Jesus's coming wasn't just for him to die on the cross for sins, but to show us how to be wholly human. That was step one. Okay, there's a different purpose than just Jesus came to die on the cross because I'm a sinner. Okay, so there's a book called The Power versus Force. 3, 2, 1. There's a book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins that talks about the study of kinesiology or muscle testing, used quite a bit by holistic healers, um, and has also got a lot of science behind it. Basically, they are able to test how a thought or a statement or an object, or an emotion is um, affecting your physical body. And lots of, like I said, lots of science behind it. And they actually tested words, they tested belief systems. Um, Not remembering what all they tested, but quite a bit of things were tested. And that just really also supports the idea of thoughts as energy. And then the last book I'll mention, other than the Bible, is one by Louise Hay called You Can Heal Your Life. And there's also quite a bit of support around the ability to heal yourself using metaphysical thought changes. And I can tell you from experience, personal experience, that this is true. And whether you choose to believe my personal experience or not, lots and lots of us have heard of the placebo effect. And that's really just boils down to your thought processes and how that influences your body. The Bible mentions a couple things that I'm going to get into that offers a little more explanation on where I came to understand Jesus at. So the Bible is in one verse in Ephesians says, "We fight not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities," meaning energetic thought patterns rather than some evil force outside of us. Um, the tongue is the littlest member, and yet it controls the power of life and death, and we eat the fruit of it. What you say is what's true. And man, I could give you so many examples for that. My most recent one just happened today. A couple of days ago, I posted a picture of a pair of hands. The first one, a manicured set of nails, and the second one, a woman who had been digging in her garden, and hands covered in dirt. And I shared this with friends proudly, and I reflected on that, and then I verbally shared it with the friend, like, "Did you see my post? That was perfect for me." In other words, that was an expression of who I am. And today, as I was doing some work in my basement, I broke a planter. And I was like, well, that's a bummer. And I caught the thought before it started down to a negative spiral. And I was like, how is this for me? So I'm shoveling up the dirt with my hands into the pot, the broken pot. And I look down at my hands and they're covered with dirt and they look just like the picture from Facebook. And I was like, oh my God, the universe is sending me a message. Got it. This is who you are. Got it. And I was like, holy cow. The tongue is the littlest member, also affects if we say negative things all the time about ourselves or our circumstances, or we dwell on um, negative thoughts, and constantly reinforce that with worry, then we're going to get exactly what we don't want to get, um, because where attention goes, energy flows. And that relates your words are a form of action. It's confirming what you believe. There's another verse that comes up for me right now. Out of the mouth comes the abundance of the heart. So whatever's inside is what's coming out of your mouth. And if you don't like what you're getting, then change what's coming out of your mouth, which means change what's coming through your mind and that you're accepting as gospel truth. So if we are all one and there is no separation between us and God, what's causing the separation? So I mentioned earlier that in the Old Testament, God refers to itself as I am. Anytime we are talking in terms of the past and we're sharing examples of who we think we are based on who we used to be, we're describing stories of me. I let me think of an example. All that's coming up is holding on to the past. Me is a story. It's not a reality. Alexa, cancel. I actually wrote a story on this. I actually had a what I call a download moment a few months ago, and it was very clear to me then, and it's not clear to me right now, which is something the mind likes to do. It chooses to not recall things, um, to keep that separation intact. But you got to tell it, like, no, I'm not having that. Part of what's happening for me right now is I'm hungry. and and lower blood sugar can make it more challenging to be present. So, having said that, I'm going to pause the video and come back after I've gotten some food in me. Okay, I'm back with some food in my belly, and my brain is more happy to work with me. So, the story of me, what I recall from what I wrote over the wintertime. When we were young, we didn't see ourselves as shameful and separated from God, very young. And then slowly fear was introduced to us because it was introduced to the people before them, et cetera, et cetera. And we built this kind of narcissistic arrangement with this shadow self who it started out just to be kind of a protective mechanism and how do I want to say, like a make believe friend. But over time, that make believe friend became who we were. And this is the story of you. This is something that all of us start creating from a very young age. As a matter of fact, I just read in a book called The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate that the theta waves that take place from age, I want to say it's 2 to 7, maybe it's 1 to 7, are very conducive to us just absorbing information. It's like a hypnotic state, as is what is used by Joe Dispenza when he does the meditations to get people into the theta brainwaves to reintroduce a new line of thinking. And they are fully aware that in those states, it's entirely possible for someone to overcome something they didn't think was doable. So I've got here some definitions of grace and what that really means. And in each definition I looked up online, the overall keywords that stood out were elegance, goodwill, and honor. In other words, elegance, like a free flowing movement. Goodwill is a giving, a back and forth type of giving, and honor, being true to yourself. Hence why I keep saying you get to pick. So, in the Bible, where Jesus is talking about the real power of forgiveness, and he's looks to a man who's paraplegic, and he tells him, "Pick up your mat, you are healed." And that man in that moment trusted what Jesus said and forgot who he was as a crippled person. Just let it go. He let go of the story of me. Like, oh, I'm a guy who can't walk. Story's over, gonna stand up and walk, just like that. It wasn't that Jesus created the miracle, it was that the man chose to believe it. Okay. That's gonna become a recurrent theme. Um, Trapped energy is trauma and vice versa, meaning trauma is trapped energy. Um, so, no matter how you look at it, when we become this old version of ourselves, we're really just falling back into a pattern of this pain body, is what Eckhart Tolle refers to it as. Um, that holds on to these trapped energies. Like I mentioned before, thought patterns can be strongholds. So if the current energy hold, as in what's shared in the Power versus Force book, all these different energy levels, is a strong pattern of fear or shame, then there's going to be a strong sense of separation. We seek unconditional love permission because we've always been conditioned to think it doesn't live inside of us always. So we keep looking outside of ourselves for somebody to validate that because that's how we've been trained. You can't love yourself unconditionally. That's not allowed. You got to be ashamed of some stuff. Again, that's the story of me. Like, oh, I did this bad thing. That's who I am. Or this is bad versus this is good based on that's what somebody told me, even though we're not really sure that's true. Our egos are convinced that we can interfere with the will of God, and they can, but only for a season. So the ultimate head game is the belief that we can stand in the way of being experiencing that connection. And here's where it gets interesting. So God, source, whatever you want to call it, will allow us, because we are creators, we are pieces of God. God will allow us to create whatever reality we would like to create. It's our game. We can play it however we want. There's a verse in the book called The Course in Miracles, which I'm going to share right now, that very much ties in with both the Bible and what I just shared. Okay, here's how it goes. Perfect love casts out fear. If fear exists, then there is not perfect love. But, and that part's all in the Bible, but only perfect love exists. If there is fear, it produces a state that does not exist. Let me flip to another part that relates a little bit more clearly. You who want peace can find it only by complete forgiveness. In other words, letting go of your story that you're not God. While lack does not exist in the creation of God or separation, it is very apparent in what you have made. In fact, it's the essential difference between them. Lack does not exist in the creation of God. Again, we are created by God and we are God creators. Lack does not exist in the creation of God. But fear and separation will lead to a sense of lack because we don't believe what we already have. We don't accept it. There's this fear in the way of it's already mine. Everything around me is connected to me, and if I have a need or a desire, all I have to do is connect with it. Like picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, can you send me a pizza?" or whatever. And the law of attraction really gets into this more. But ultimately, God will only allow that version of the game that we're playing to go on for so long. And we are designed like moths to a flame to come back to the truth. And so those challenging experiences that we have, like breaking a pot, a planter, or your basement flooding, like happened to me today, are meant to create an awareness in us, just like with my story of Grace. What I recognized was her death allowed me to get so uncomfortable with my belief system that I was drawn towards something that was who I was meant to be. And our soul is always doing the doing. Our ego can't, our ego likes to think we can get in the way. We've got all these blocks. We got to do this. We got to do that. Our ego likes to manufacture that stuff when in reality, the big head game is we don't need any fixing. It's already, all we have to do is decide that we're good to go. Another verse from the Tao Te Ching says, all of life is drawing us to our perfect peace. Perfect peace. So back to the example of Jesus. So then, if there is no hell, if we're not separated, if God doesn't hate us, we're not sinners, we're not worthy of punishment, and we're actually the ones creating our own suffering by embracing these thoughts of fear and lack, then what was the point of Jesus? Well, just like the rest of us, he came to play the game, but Jesus was extraordinarily good at the game, as are some other people like Gandhi, um, and Mandela. You know, people that really stand out in history as wow, they really had some stuff figured out. Jesus stands out more because Jesus really understood that I can physically do anything, anything. I just have to believe it. That's it. Period. End of story. Um, he also, in his coming and showing us how to be fully human, what it means to be both fully human and fully God, is to interrupt those thought patterns, that heavy energy of shame was interrupted by his act of selflessness. um and whether you choose to believe he died on the cross and rose again, um he did play full out and allowed himself to be martyred, knowing like he could have interfered with that situation. um but he chose not to. And he chose not to, I believe, because he created then such a strong sense of understanding a new thought pattern. Like he raised the vibration, is how some people would say. Like there was this heavy level of shame, and when you're that far down in the pit, it can be nearly impossible to see a way out. When you've ever, if you've ever experienced like a severe depression or a really strong grief like I did, um you don't see a way out, you don't. But eventually it just happens, the light comes on, and I think it's because that new thought wave was contributed to by Jesus. um Also, the Course of Miracles talks about he's kind of a conduit for miracles. He's not better than us, not at all. um and he even says that in the Bible, like we're brothers. um but he has the ability to pass along information. And maybe he doesn't, maybe I'm wrong, maybe the Course in Miracle is wrong too, it doesn't matter. What matters is, if you recognize that in loving yourself wholeheartedly, you then shine that light for other people to do the same. It's a ripple effect. And just like you learn from others, we learn from somebody who came before us who's got it figured out. That does not mean you have to follow Jesus. It just means that that thought pattern has been put out into the universe and it's there for us to grab hold of. In the Bible, right after Jesus dies, there's a veil in the Holy of Holies, which was a Jewish temple. Um, and the veil between the two different parts of, the most inner sanctuary and the outer sanctuary, were only some people could go into the inner sanctuary, but most people only went into the outer sanctuary. That veil ripped in two. um and to me that just means that there was an expansion of thought. There's the veil in our mind was removed, like, oh, now I can see that forgiveness is an option. I didn't even know that was a thing. um It kind of reminds me of the movies The Truman Show or The Matrix or Pleasantville, where each of the main characters in those shows have this aha moment of like, oh, I'm a character in a show. And um they they choose to step out of that role and say, okay, how do I want to live? How do I choose to live? Um So really this was just a physical manifestation of the miracle in the minds of many. If you move from a victim mindset of I need saved, I'm a sinner, I'm terrible, I'm bad, to a creator mindset of I am God, Jesus is also God, so is my next door neighbor, my brother, my sister, my kid, all of us, then you can look at Jesus instead of as a rescuer, you look at Jesus as a coach, somebody to encourage you, someone to be a role model. Like a coach would say, if I can do it, you can do it. As opposed to a rescuer might say, well, you better just let me handle this because I'm the expert. And I think probably anybody listening to this video has had that experience at least once in their life, either with a doctor or a relative or a clergy person or whatever. Somebody saying, you can't handle this decision. A coach would say, you have the power to do it because you have the spirit of love, power, and sound mind, just like I do. You're wholly creative and capable. And that last bit, spirit of love, power, and sound mind, is also in the Bible. A rescuer would say, well, you have power, but only if you trust me. So let me help you out with that because you can't really handle that situation. A coach would say, anything you learn is valuable experience. And a rescuer would say, oh, here, let me do that for you because I think it'll be too hard and I wouldn't want you to make the wrong decision. In other words, you're not capable. So I chose to set aside the idea of Jesus being my savior because I am, and we all are, still creators. We are still the I am, even without Jesus as a savior. So, how do we level up like Jesus? Well, you have to overcome the victim mindset by living in the present. And how do you do that? You become aware of your thoughts and feelings and where your mind is. Your feelings are a reflection of your thoughts. Your body is a reflection of your feelings. So, what is your feelings trying to tell you about your thoughts? Or what is your body trying to tell you that you're ignoring about your feelings and your thoughts? There's a reason why they call it the pain body. Those trapped energies are stuck there because you're not allowing things to flow because of some kind of limiting belief. So, flow with grace, give yourself grace, be an unconditional love to yourself. And take responsibility by choosing transformation, not just information. So you watch this video and then you say, okay, cool, that was interesting. Now, I'm not telling you to buy into everything I said. Take it or leave it, whatever works for you. However, figure out what works for you and go do that. Don't just talk about it. Don't just think about it. Don't just say, well, that was an interesting piece of information. Okay, well, that doesn't help you change your life. In law of attraction, there's a simple formula that I've learned recently from a spiritual teacher. Alexa, cancel. His name is Najendra, I believe. Anyway, 3-step formula. Notion, in other words, an idea. So right now I've given you some ideas. Emotion, you establish how you feel about it. Are you curious about it? Are you excited about it? Do you hate it? Okay, you hate it, it's not for you. Cool. Move on. If you're curious about it or excited about it, then the next step is motion. Take some sort of action. Okay, I'm curious enough about this to follow up in this way. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to check on what she said. I'm going to look into her. I'm going to watch some more of her videos. I'm going to um, talk to a friend, whatever. Take some sort of action that feels inspired to you. So, awareness and self compassion or grace are key. And once you've figured out about the awareness, part of that is going to be establishing where are you living? Are you living in the past, in the present, or the future? And you look at the diagram there. I don't really need to explain it, but very quickly, in the present, there's clarity, acceptance, joy, understanding, peace, and gratitude. In the past, there's going to be a lot of um, repleting emotions. In the future, there's going to be a lot of repleting emotions because you are not in the current state of creation. You're in the story of me. Don't shame yourself though. That's your ego too. So, oh man, yesterday or 5 minutes ago, I was not in the flow. Okay, that was 5 minutes ago. That was yesterday. That was a year ago. That was whatever. Let it go. Complete forgiveness is what will move you in the process. Lots of tools that can be helpful. I've listed some here. The most important tool you have is to ask yourself what resonates. Your emotions are your compass. If something excites you and feels good, that's your body's saying, yes, we're in agreement. That's the way to go. Um, but you have to have awareness for that. You have to be noticing how something feels. If your body, on the other hand, is saying, I hate this, it's terrible, it makes no sense, I don't like it, it makes me stressed out, then your body's also telling you something. Your soul is telling you something. Um, Although it's important to make a distinction between whether your ego has a problem with it or your soul has a problem with it. If it feels expansive you're, and scary, then it's your soul talking. If it feels contracting and scary, it's your ego talking. So, for example, me creating this video, I could have said, "Well, I'm feeling too afraid that I'll make a mistake or people won't like it." Okay, that would be ego. But maybe on the other hand, it's, well, this is going to be challenging and I might make some mistakes, but I'm kind of excited about the idea because this could be helpful to some people. I'm going to overcome that fear. That's your soul talking. So you have to learn what feels expansive and what doesn't. So there's some tools I listed of ways to help you if you get stuck, because clarity comes from being in the present moment. There's a song I like by Jason Mraz, and not remembering the name of the song, but in one of the lyrics he says, if you're overwhelmed, be where your feet are. In other words, what can I do in this moment? So to summarize, beliefs or our faith in them are what determine our choices, like in the first slide with all the famous people. Unconditional means without exception. And if you're watching this video, you've probably already established that there's some contradictions in what you've been taught, and that was the big one for me. All creation starts with the thought I am, followed by words and actions. You are a creator. I am a creator. Everything is energy, including you, and that all comes from God. We are all, as August Gold likes to say, oceans in a drop. God is the ocean. We are oceans in a drop. We have all the godness in us. We are all energetically connected because we're all the ocean in a drop. So we're just little pieces of ocean, little here, little there. Our story of ego, or the story of me, is what separates us. It's not sin, it's a lack of belief. Jesus says, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you could do these things and greater. In other words, you too are a creator. You just have to trust that. Jesus is the conduit, like an older, wiser brother, not a rescuer. Or I could even say like a role model, somebody that you really look up to as, wow, that person has a lot to teach me. So if you've made it through the whole video, thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been helpful. I'm open to discussing this if people would like to do that. I understand some people might take offense to this, and I would ask you, if that is the case, to notice what it is within you that feels the need to control what I believe or what I share with others, and reflect on that. Thank you.